Let's take you to news on the go. SADC is today launching the Electoral Observation Mission to the elections of South Africa. In fact, the mission's objective is to assess the conduct of the polls in accordance with the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. These principles emphasize, among others, the importance of citizen participation in the democratic and developmental process. In fact, that media briefing has already begun. The head of the mission is speaking. Let's listen in.
In particular, where such recommendations seek to close gaps and address specific challenges in the electoral systems of our member states. We wish to thank those stakeholders who made time to meet with the SADC during the pre-election phase and thank them in advance for availing themselves during the election phase consultations that will be starting tomorrow. The SADC Electoral Observation Mission, SEOM, has been in South Africa since the 13th May 2024. We have had people here to observe the national and provincial elections set for 29th May 2024. The SEOM noted that the elections are governed by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and a comprehensive set of relevant laws. It is in line with these national legal instruments that the SADC Electoral Observation Mission will assess the conduct of the elections against a set of central principles stipulated in the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, such as full participation of the citizens of the democratic and development processes, enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of association, assembly, and expression, observance of the provisions of relevant legal framework in relation to the date or period of elections, measures to prevent corruption, bribery, favoritism, political violence, intimidation, and intolerance. Equal opportunity for all political parties to access the state media, as well as access to information by all citizens. Respect for values of electoral justice, such as integrity, impartiality, and fairness. No undue restraints against the opportunity to exercise the right to vote and be voted for. Independence of the judiciary and impartiality of the electoral institutions. Capacitation and empowerment of citizens through civic and voter education. Acceptance of and respect for the election results by candidates and political parties as proclaimed to have been free, fair, transparent, credible, and peaceful by the competent and independent Electoral Commission in accordance with the law of the land. And provision of electoral justice through expedient settlement of electoral disputes as provided for by the law. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is essential that all stakeholders understand that the mandate of the SEOM is to determine the adherence of the member state holding elections to the relevant provisions of the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. In this respect, please allow me to go into some detail for the benefit of all. In order to fulfill its mandate, the SEOM assesses and evaluates the following, amongst others: whether the legal and constitutional framework guarantees freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and human rights. The structure and model of the electoral system, the electoral management body, the Electoral Act and regulations, and the nature of civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. The establishment process of appointment and retention of members of the EMBs, in addition to assessing the composition, status, independence, impartiality, professionalism, and preparedness of the EMB for the election. The SEOM shall ensure that the elimination of election boundaries was done in a manner acceptable to stakeholders, and whether the factors that prompted the elimination were in accordance with the laws of the land. Whether the elimination process was undertaken in accordance with a national law and without undue exclusion of particular groups or political interests. The procedures for nomination and provision of reasonable time frames to allow political parties and candidates to comply with the requirements of the registration process. The existence of a code of conduct governing all political parties and candidates. The neutrality of the security forces in providing election security, and the existence of requisite special voting facilities for security forces to enable them cast their votes. The requirements and practices regarding direct and indirect access to the mass media for political parties, candidates, supporters, and the general public. The requirements and practice concerning reporting by state-controlled public and private media about political parties, candidates, and supporters or opponents. The capacity and quality of civic and voter education programs to afford all prospective voters accurate, comprehensive, and adequate information upon which to make electoral choices. The extent to which the process enjoys the trust of the electorate, including inclusiveness, accuracy, and transparency, and whether the electorate are able to own and identify with the process. The appropriateness of locations of polling stations and adequacy and accessibility of their facilities. In one country, we went to conduct elections. There was a threat to some facilities because they were behind the houses. In one case, the voting machine was in somebody's bedroom, and things like that. So it was a little bit difficult. That's what we mean by access. The production and distribution to polling stations and storage of ballots and other sensitive election materials. the conduct of voting, including assistance to voters, counting, tabulation, and announcement of results, the transparency of procedures, and adequate of safeguards against inaccuracies, and the conduct of procedures and processes concerning electoral complaints and challenges by citizens, prospective voters, and those seeking election, including the provision of effective remedies for violation of electoral-related rights. In order to obtain an objective and impartial basis from which to draw its findings, the SEOM necessarily requires to consult a broad, diverse, and unrestricted range of stakeholders in such member states holding elections. Some of the most critical stakeholders are the competing political parties. We like to meet as many political parties as would like to meet us, and independent candidates. There are many political parties this time around. Some are contesting only at the provincial and or regional levels. We understand that 15 political parties are contesting all tiers of the elections. There are 52 parties on the national compensatory ballot. In total, there are 14,903 candidates, but vying for 887 seats in the National Assembly and provincial legislatures. I wish to emphasize that there are 52 parties on the ballot. In total, there are 14,903 candidates vying for 887 seats in the National Assembly and provincial legislatures. You can therefore just imagine, out of the seats available are only 887, but there are 14,903 candidates. So there's problem number one there. Yeah. You will therefore understand that given our limited time, our mission will not be able to engage with all political parties, and let alone all independent candidates at our mission headquarters here in Johannesburg. However, our observers will fan out across the entire provinces of South Africa. They will be able to complement the efforts of the mission headquarters in this regard. In the context of our evaluation methodology, allow me to mention a few matters. This is the first time that independent candidates are contesting at the national level. This new electoral terrain is as a result of new laws being passed to comply with a decision of the Constitutional Court that directed for the inclusion of independent candidates in the electoral process. Our mission, therefore, acknowledges the exemplary application of the principle of the separation of powers in the democratic process. Further, given the new laws that entrench the recent electoral reforms, ordinary inter-party disputes, it is inevitable that there has been and will be legal disputes leading to litigation. Such litigation actually reflects faith in the judiciary of South Africa as a key component of the country's democracy. In order to prevent or mitigate the all too human propensity for gossip, speculation, and conspiracy, we urge the judiciary to dispense with electoral disputes expeditiously whilst providing full reasons for such expedited judgments.
All right, so those are live visuals from Boksburg. And speaking there is Enoch Kavindele. He's actually the former vice president of Zambia, also heading up the SADC mission to the country's elections. Of course, several missions from all over the world are set to arrive to watch this all-anticipated election unfold next week, including from SADC itself, the AU, the EU, and the Commonwealth. We heard there Mr. Kavindele speaking about the South African judiciary. That's featured very prominently, of course, in the lead up to the 29th of May, given the litigation around the electoral process and who can legitimately be part of this all-stakes poll.